The morning of my wedding, I was sitting in the bridal suite of the Rosewood Grand Hotel with a cup of coffee going cold in my hands and a decision that had already been made for 4 months. My bridesmaids were moving somewhere behind me, laughing, adjusting flowers, spraying something that smelled like gardenias. My phone had 41 notifications I hadn't opened. My mother had texted me twice before 8 in the morning asking if there was still time to adjust the seating at table 7. There wasn't. My sister Brooke was somewhere in this building, in a room on the 4th floor she had reserved herself 2 weeks before the ceremony, and in approximately 4 hours she was planning to walk into my wedding in a white dress. I knew this because I had heard her say it. I had 42 minutes of audio of her saying it to her best friend on a phone call she did not know existed. And the man standing at the main entrance of the Rosewood Grand at that very moment, with a radio clipped to his belt and an earpiece in his left ear, had a photograph of my sister on his phone along with a clear set of instructions about what to do if she appeared in anything that could be described as white, ivory, cream, champagne, or off-white. Brooke didn't know any of that. She thought she was going to walk in and take the moment. She had been taking moments my entire life. She was very good at it. This one was mine. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. My name is Mara Caldwell, and I am 34 years old. I've been a financial analyst at a healthcare management firm in Charlotte, North Carolina for 7 years. I met my husband Daniel at an industry conference in 2021, and after 18 months of long-distance calls and weekend flights and one very long conversation on a hotel balcony in Nashville where we decided we were done pretending this wasn't serious, we got engaged in October of 2023. He proposed outside a restaurant in Charleston on an evening that was warmer than it had any right to be for fall. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We planned the wedding carefully. Not lavishly, but with intention. The Rosewood Grand. 112 guests. A garden ceremony in the pavilion and a reception in the Magnolia Ballroom on the 2nd floor. A dress I had saved for myself without telling anyone the price. Flowers I spent 3 weekends choosing. Music we built a playlist for together on a Sunday afternoon in our apartment with the windows open. It was ours, every detail of it. Or it was supposed to be. To understand what was waiting at the entrance of that hotel, and why, you need to understand what the previous 31 years of being Brooke Caldwell's younger sister had actually looked like. Not the version my mother tells at family dinners, where everything is love and sacrifice and we always did our best. The real version. The one with the numbers in it. My parents, James and Beverly Caldwell, have lived in the same house in Greensboro, North Carolina since 1989. My father spent 30 years in commercial real estate before retiring in 2022. My mother has run an alterations shop out of the back of their home since I was in elementary school. They are not wealthy. They are stable, careful with money in the ways that people who grew up without much learn to be, and deeply, completely, and in ways that shaped everything, partial to my sister in a manner they have never once acknowledged and have spent decades rationalizing as something else entirely. Brooke is 37. She is beautiful in the way that makes people turn around in grocery stores. She has 92,000 followers on Instagram, where she posts about her apartment in Charleston, her skincare, her travel, the carefully lit corners of a life that looks effortless because she has spent years arranging it to look that way. My mother used to say that Brooke came into the world photogenic and the rest of us just had to work with what we had. She said it laughing. She thought it was neutral. It was not neutral. It was the whole map of our family, condensed into a single sentence. I was the quiet one. The studious one. The one who tested well and made the honor roll and did not require performance or an audience to feel like myself. I was not unhappy as a child. I had friends and interests and a sense of what I wanted from my life that came to me early and stayed consistent. But I existed, in my family, at a remove that I understood by the time I was 12 and had stopped expecting to change by the time I was 17. Birthday money was never equal. Christmas was never equal. When my parents made investments in our futures, the math was different depending on which daughter was receiving. Brooke got a dance intensive at 15, a modeling portfolio at 17, and a full year in Europe at 20, flights and accommodation and spending money, paid entirely by our parents. I went to UNC Charlotte on a partial academic scholarship and worked 20 hours a week at the campus library to cover the gap, and graduated in 2013 with $31,400 in student loans, which I paid off myself over 6 years on a schedule I built in a spreadsheet and hit every milestone of without asking a single person for help. I am not telling you this so you will feel sorry for me. I am telling you this because it is the foundation of everything. Because what happened at my wedding did not begin at my wedding. It began in the accumulation of 31 years of being told, in ways both direct and invisible, that my needs were the flexible category. That I was the capable one and Brooke was the one who needed protecting. That family support was something distributed based on who seemed to require it most visibly, and I had made the mistake of being the kind of person who figured things out on her own, and so things were figured out for me on my own, forever. When Daniel proposed, my parents called me on a Sunday afternoon 3 weeks later. Speakerphone, which they reserve for logistics and important conversations. "We want to contribute to the wedding," my mother said. "We've been setting money aside for this." I felt something loosen in my chest. Something I had not felt around my family in a long time. $20,000, my father said. "We know it's not everything, but it's what we can do and we want to do it." I told them it was more than enough and I meant every word. Daniel drove me around the neighborhood that evening because I needed to move. I was that glad. The Rosewood Grand required a 30% deposit by January 15th. That was $14,200. In December, I asked my mother about the timeline for the contribution and she said things had come up. A gap with Brooke's apartment lease, something with her car, nothing major, just a situation that needed addressing and she was sure I understood. The $20,000 was not gone, she said. Just delayed. Try March. I paid the deposit myself. January 14th. My card, my savings account, my name on the receipt. March came with a different explanation. Brooke had secured a new content partnership and there were upfront costs she had not anticipated, and my parents had helped her cover them because the opportunity was time-sensitive and they hadn't wanted her to miss it. The wedding contribution was now looking more like $12,000. Maybe 10. They would know more soon. I opened a spreadsheet. Not from anger, though the anger was there and growing. From necessity, because I work with numbers for a living and I knew the only way to see a situation clearly is to put it in a form that does not lie. Deposits already paid. Remaining balances due. Vendor quotes. Catering at $96 per head for 112 guests came to $10,752 before gratuity. Photography, $4,200. Flowers, $1,800. The dress, which I had purchased without mentioning the price to anyone, was $2,200. Alterations, done by my mother for free, which was the only concrete thing she gave me that year and which I recorded in the spreadsheet as a credit. By May, my parents had sent me $3,000. $3,000 out of 20. When I asked my father directly about the rest, he said that weddings were ultimately the couple's responsibility and that Daniel and I both had strong incomes and that he was sure we understood. I said that was true and also beside the point of a promise. He said I was making this into something it wasn't. My mother said she felt terrible and that she loved me and that maybe we could revisit it after the wedding when everyone was less stressed. I did not tell Daniel the full picture for 3 more weeks. When I did, on a Tuesday night at our kitchen table, I showed him the spreadsheet. The original promise. What had arrived? What had gone to Brooke, itemized from things my mother had mentioned across a dozen different conversations without realizing she was building a record. He read it without speaking for a long time. Then he asked one question. How long has this been happening? I told him. His jaw tightened. He got up and did the dishes and put on something in the kitchen and let me sit with it. He was furious on my behalf in the quiet way that tells you a person is genuinely in your corner and not performing concern. Then came June. 2 months before the wedding. Brooke announced she had a surprise for us. A honeymoon gift. 4 nights at a resort on the Outer Banks, fully covered, she said. She posted about it on Instagram before calling us directly. A photograph of the resort's website, a red heart, a caption about celebrating her sister and Daniel. 47,000 impressions before I'd even seen the post. I thanked her. I was sincere. I had not yet understood what I was looking at. Daniel figured it out first. He found the booking confirmation through a travel rewards site Brooke had mentioned using. The stay had been purchased with points earned on a single large charge made in April. He traced it to a home goods purchase of $9,800 in Charleston. I called my mother and mentioned casually that I'd seen some details about the honeymoon booking, just curious about something. She paused one beat too long before answering. In that pause, I understood everything. The $9,800 had come from money my parents had wired to Brooke in March. The money they described as covering her car situation, her apartment gap. Brooke had spent most of it and used the remaining travel credit to book us a 4-night resort stay that she then announced publicly as her gift to us. Our honeymoon present from my sister had been paid for with a portion of our own wedding contribution, rerouted through my parents, spent down, and returned to us as generosity. She had generated content out of it. She had 47,000 impressions out of it. And she had not paid $1 of her own money for any of it. I said nothing to my mother. I thanked her again and hung up and sat on the floor of my home office for a while. Then I got up and opened a new folder on my laptop desktop. I named it August 2024. I began saving everything. Screenshots, text messages, email timestamps, bank transfer confirmations, the Instagram post with its date and caption. Printed copies went into a physical folder in our filing cabinet, the one where Daniel kept the car titles and the lease. I did not know exactly what I was building it toward. I only knew that I was done operating without documentation. The white dress came 6 weeks before the wedding. I didn't hear it from Brooke. I heard it from 42 minutes of audio I was never supposed to find. Brooke and I had shared a family photo storage account since 2018, something my mother had set up so we could all access pictures from holidays and events. I used it occasionally to upload engagement photos. Brooke used it for various things, and among those things was occasionally backing up her phone when her own storage was full. One evening in late June I was searching the account for a photograph my mother wanted for the wedding slideshow. I found it. I also found a voice memo, 42 minutes long, timestamped June 9th, that appeared to be a phone call Brooke had recorded by accident by leaving her memo app running. I nearly skipped it. Then I heard my name in the first 30 seconds. I listened to the entire thing. Brooke and her best friend Kelsey talking about the wedding, about Daniel, about me. In minute 11, Kelsey asked what Brooke was planning to wear. Brooke said white. A full white column gown from a boutique in Atlanta. And then she said the exact sentence that I have not forgotten. She said, "Mara is going to lose her mind." Said it lightly. The way a person says something when they are certain there will be no consequence. Kelsey laughed and said she couldn't, and Brooke said, "Watch me." Then she talked about the toast she was planning to give. Something about how marriage was hard and Daniel should understand what he was getting into. Said it like a joke. Then she moved on to something else entirely. I closed my laptop. I sat in the quiet of my home office with the specific feeling of someone who has just been handed the confirmation of something they already suspected. Then I opened the laptop again and did 2 things. I saved a timestamped audio excerpt of the relevant section of that memo, backed it up in 3 places, and sent a copy to an email address only I controlled. And I typed 4 words into a search bar, Event Security Coordinator Charlotte. I found Marcus Webb through a referral from the Rosewood Grand's venue coordinator, who mentioned him when I called to discuss the vendor check-in process. Marcus was a former law enforcement officer with 12 years of experience in private event security. We met at a coffee shop 2 days later. I brought a folder. I laid out the situation clearly, without emotion, the way I would present a financial discrepancy to a client. He asked precise questions. He did not express an opinion about my family. He quoted me a flat rate that was reasonable given the scope. We shook hands, and he took the job. Over the following 4 weeks we met twice more. He reviewed the full guest list. He coordinated with the Rosewood Grand's front-of-house team to align protocols. He drafted a written incident procedure that gave the venue documentation in the event anything was disputed. On the morning of August 17th, Marcus arrived at the Rosewood Grand at 8 a.m. His team of 2 covered every entry point the hotel had made available to wedding guests. Each member of his team had a recent photograph of Brooke Caldwell on their phone. The protocol was straightforward. If Brooke appeared in anything in the white family of colors, she would be approached professionally and given a choice. She could change into something from the rack we had prepared in a room off the main lobby, 3 sizes, jewel tones, nothing white, or she could wait in that room until after the ceremony concluded, at which point she could join the reception, still not in white, or she could leave. The choice would be hers. The only thing that was not an option was walking into my ceremony in a white dress. I had also arranged something else. Something that had nothing to do with the dress and everything to do with the money. But that part was still waiting. That part required the reception, and Daniel's best man, and a specific moment after dinner when the floor was open for toasts. I had prepared for that too. Every document I had spent 4 months collecting was organized, labeled, and in the hands of the one person I trusted completely to deploy it if needed. That morning, sitting in the bridal suite with cold coffee and 41 unread notifications, I was not nervous. I was not angry. I was something quieter than both of those things. I was ready. And in a hotel 4 floors below me, my sister was getting dressed in a white gown, completely certain that today was going to belong to her. She had no idea what was already in place. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. At 10:47 in the morning, Marcus Webb sent me a text. 2 words. She's here. I was in the middle of having my veil pinned into place. My maid of honor, Priya, was holding a mirror at an angle so I could see the back of my head. I read the message and set my phone face down on the vanity and said, "Okay." Priya looked at me in the mirror. "Okay, what?" I said, "Nothing. Something I needed to know." She gave me a look that meant she would ask about it later. She would ask about it later and I would tell her everything. But not yet. Marcus had briefed me the night before about how the intercept would go. Professional, calm, no drama at the entrance. The goal was containment, not confrontation. His exact word was containment. I had appreciated that. I did not want a scene at the front door of the Rosewood Grand. I wanted the scene I had prepared, at the time I had prepared it, in the room I had chosen, in front of the people whose opinions my sister had spent her entire life performing for. Timing was everything. Marcus understood that. He was very good at his job. Brooke had arrived at the main entrance at 10:46 in a white column gown. I knew this from the follow-up message Marcus sent 90 seconds after the first. He described it as floor-length, fitted, with a low back. The boutique in Atlanta that Brooke had mentioned to Kelsey in the voice memo had sent her something that, by any reasonable interpretation, was a bridal gown. She had not attempted to disguise this. She had walked in through the front entrance of the hotel in broad daylight in a white dress on her sister's wedding day with the confidence of someone who had never once been stopped from doing what she wanted. Marcus had stopped her 12 feet inside the entrance. I was not there for the conversation. I had the summary from Marcus later that afternoon, and I have thought about it many times since. He introduced himself by name and role. He explained politely that the couple had a dress code policy for their immediate family and that Brooke's attire did not meet it. Brooke told him she was the bride's sister and that no one had mentioned a policy to her. Marcus said he understood and that he had a room available where she could change and that there were several options in her size. Brooke told him she was not going to change. Marcus said that he respected that and that in that case he would be glad to escort her to the family waiting area, a comfortable room with refreshments off the main lobby, where she could join the ceremony view through the monitor the hotel had set up, and then attend the reception afterward, at which point the policy would no longer apply. Brooke said she was a guest and this was harassment. Marcus said she was welcome to speak to the hotel's guest services manager about her concerns and that he would be happy to wait while she did so. His tone, he told me later, was the same throughout the entire exchange. Level. Unhurried. Unbothered. Brooke changed into the dress. Marcus had stocked the rack with 3 options. She chose the one in deep plum, a draped midi that actually suited her, which I knew it would because I had put it there knowing her coloring and her taste in silhouettes even as I arranged for it to be used as a constraint. It fit her well. She looked beautiful in it. She walked into the ceremony 20 minutes later and took her seat in the 3rd row on the family side with the expression of a woman holding something tightly behind her teeth. My father walked me down the aisle. I had thought carefully about whether to include him. I had decided yes, because the decision about my father was a separate conversation for a separate day, and because my wedding was not going to be organized around what he had done wrong. It was going to be organized around what Daniel and I were building. That is the difference between a day of justice and a day of happiness. I wanted both. I had planned for both. The ceremony was 23 minutes long. We had written our own vows. Daniel's made me laugh twice and cry once, in that order, which is exactly what you want from a man who knows you well. I did not look at Brooke during the ceremony. I did not look at my mother, who was crying in the front row with the performative quality she brings to all public emotion. I looked at Daniel. I looked at the pavilion garden with the afternoon light coming through the wisteria the Rosewood Grand had trained along the pergola for 3 decades. I looked at our 112 people gathered in rows of white chairs on a Saturday in August and I thought, clearly and without distraction, this is mine. This moment is entirely mine. We were married at 11:41 in the morning. The reception moved to the Magnolia Ballroom on the 2nd floor at 1 o'clock. 12 tables of 8 and a head table for the wedding party, white linen and tall centerpieces with garden roses and blush and ivory, string lights threaded through the ceiling supports in a way that made the whole room look like it was lit from inside something warm. The caterers had done exactly what I had asked them to do. The playlist was exactly what Daniel and I had built together on that Sunday with the windows open. It was, by every measure I had applied to it, perfect. Brooke sat at table 6. I had placed her between our mutual cousin Renata, who is kind and asks a lot of questions, and an old college friend of Daniel's named Patrick, who is sociable enough to fill any silence. I had thought about her seating with care. I did not want her isolated. I wanted her occupied. There is a difference between cruelty and strategy, and I have always understood it precisely. Dinner moved through its courses. The speeches before the meal were light. Daniel's college roommate gave a toast about the Nashville conference where we met that made the whole table laugh. Priya spoke about our friendship and said something about me that I will carry for a long time. My father gave a toast that was warm and brief and did not mention the wedding contribution or Brooke or anything financial. He raised his glass and said he was proud of me and that Daniel was getting the best person he had ever known, and I accepted both of those things for what they were worth and did not reach for the rest of it right then. Brooke had not asked to give a toast. In the voice memo, she had talked about what she wanted to say. Something she had framed as a speech for the couple, advice about marriage being difficult, a line she had phrased carefully enough to sound like sisterly wisdom while landing exactly like a warning. I had heard 42 minutes of her rehearsing the performance in her own head, and I had known that she would find a way to insert herself into the toast portion of the evening regardless of whether she had been scheduled. That is what Brooke does. She inserts herself. She always finds the microphone. At 2:45, during the open floor portion after the meal, she found it. The DJ had just finished a round of dedications. The floor was warm and relaxed. Brooke stood up from table 6, made eye contact with the DJ, and held out her hand in the way that people who are used to being accommodated hold out their hands. He gave her the microphone. She was smiling. She had that performance-ready radiance she turns on in front of an audience, the one I had watched her deploy my entire life. She said she wanted to say something from the heart. She said she loved her sister and wanted Daniel to truly understand the woman he had married. She said marriage was a commitment that required complete honesty and that she wanted to offer a little wisdom from someone who had known Mara her whole life. The room was listening. 112 people, champagne glasses in hand, giving her the attention she had always required. She paused for effect. She was very good at the pause. She had spent decades practicing it. I stood up. Not quickly. Not dramatically. I placed my napkin on the table, pushed back my chair, and stood in the way that people stand when they are certain of what happens next. Brooke's eyes found me. Her smile did not waver immediately. She thought I was going to walk toward her and take the microphone. She thought this was going to be a moment of sisterly tension she could spin. I could see the recalculation happening in her face as I did not reach for the microphone but instead reached toward Daniel, who placed in my hand a folded manila envelope that had been sitting under his jacket for the past 3 hours. I said her name once. Brooke. The way you say a name when you need a room to understand that what comes next is addressed to one specific person. She stopped. Lowered the microphone an inch. The room felt the shift. Rooms always feel it when the power changes hands. I want to share something too, I said. Since we're doing this. I opened the envelope. The documents inside were printed on white paper, clean and organized, each page labeled at the top with a date and a description. I had prepared them with the same precision I use when building a financial report for a client. No emotion, no excess. Just the data, arranged so that anyone in the room could follow it without being a financial analyst. I held up the first page and spoke clearly enough for the tables nearest us to hear without raising my voice beyond a conversational register. I said, in November of last year, our parents promised a $20,000 contribution toward this wedding. I said it without accusation in my tone. As a fact. The way you state an opening balance. My mother's head turned toward me from the front table. My father went still. I said, over the following 9 months, I received $3,000 of that commitment. I said, the remaining $17,000 was redirected in 4 separate transfers, which I have documented here, to cover my sister Brooke's apartment lease shortfall, her car note, startup costs for a content partnership she was pursuing, and a home goods purchase in Charleston in April of this year. That last item, I said, is the one I want to make sure everyone understands clearly, because Brooke used the rewards points from that $9,800 purchase to book our honeymoon in the Outer Banks, which she announced on Instagram as her gift to us before she had called us to tell us about it personally. I looked at Brooke. She gave us back a fraction of our own money, I said, and generated 47,000 impressions from it. The room was quiet in the specific way that rooms go quiet when something real has landed. Not the silence of boredom or confusion. The silence of 112 people processing simultaneously. I heard a glass being set down very carefully on a table somewhere to my left. I heard my mother say something that didn't become a word. I placed the documents on the nearest table without making a display of it. Then I looked at Brooke, who was still holding the microphone, and I said the only thing left to say. You were not invited to give a toast. 10 words. I had written them down months ago and crossed them out twice and written them again and left them. They were right. They were exactly right. Not cruel. Not screaming. Just the truth, stated plainly, in a room full of people whose opinion my sister had always cared about far more than she cared about mine. Brooke set the microphone down on the nearest table. She did not slam it. She set it down and turned and walked toward the exit of the Magnolia Ballroom with her back straight and her chin level and her borrowed plum dress moving behind her, and she did not look at me, and she did not look at our parents, and she did not stop. The DJ read the room with impressive accuracy and began a song within 4 seconds. The string lights kept doing what string lights do. The roses in the centerpieces were still blush and ivory. Daniel took my hand under the table and squeezed it once, and that was everything. It was my cousin Renata who started speaking first. She was sitting at table 6, right where Brooke had been, and she turned to the person next to her and said something quietly that I didn't hear. But I watched other conversations resume, one table at a time, the way a room fills back in after a window has been opened and then closed. The moment didn't end the reception. It clarified it. That is the thing about the truth delivered without theater. It doesn't destroy a room. It just makes the room more honest than it was before. My mother left 20 minutes later. She found me at the edge of the dance floor and gripped my forearm and said, "How could you?" Her voice was very low and her eyes were wet. I looked at her and said, "The same way you could, Mom." She let go of my arm and walked out. My father stayed another hour. He danced with no one. He ate nothing that I saw. He shook Daniel's hand on the way out, a long handshake, and said something to him that I didn't ask about until later. Daniel told me my father had said, "She deserved better from us." He had said it quietly and walked out without looking back. The rest of the reception went on until 9:30 in the evening. We danced. We ate. Priya gave a second toast that got the whole room laughing again, which is what a best friend does when a room needs resetting. Daniel's best man Marcus, the other Marcus, our friend from Charlotte who had known us since the beginning, said something about how watching us get married was the first time he had ever been jealous of a married couple, and the room cheered. By 7 o'clock the string lights were the only illumination in the Magnolia Ballroom and everyone who was left was people we loved and who loved us without condition, and it was the best part of the night. That evening in our suite, Daniel and I sat on the small balcony with the city below us and I told him everything. The full timeline. Marcus Webb, the hiring, the dress rack, the protocol, the 42 minutes of audio, the months of documentation. He listened to all of it. When I finished he was quiet for a moment and then he said, "I knew you were handling something. I just didn't know how much." I asked if he was bothered that I hadn't told him everything up front. He thought about it honestly, which is what I had always loved about him. Then he said, "No. You know how to protect yourself. I just wish you'd had to do it less often." The fallout was not slow. In families where one person has been the center of gravity for 30 years, disruption moves fast. Brooke drove back to Charleston that evening. She did not send a message. She did not call. She posted nothing on Instagram for 4 days, which, for someone with 92,000 followers who typically posts daily, was a statement. On day 5 she published a photograph of a coastline with a caption that said, "Choosing peace and people who understand it." She did not tag me. She did not name the wedding. She left the comment section open for 40 minutes before the replies became unmanageable and she turned it off. On Monday morning my mother called. I let the call ring to voicemail. She left a message that was 9 minutes long and moved through 3 distinct phases. The first was grief, the real kind, wet and ragged and hard to listen to. The second was explanation. They had helped Brooke because Brooke needed it more, because Brooke was struggling in ways I hadn't seen, because they had believed she was turning a corner with her career and they had wanted to support that corner. The third was the sentence she always comes back to eventually. "We're family. We don't air things like this in public." I saved the voicemail. I added it to the August 2024 folder. My father texted on Tuesday. One sentence. I meant what I said to Daniel. I read it twice. Then I set my phone down and went for a walk, which is what I do when I need to feel things without deciding what to do about them yet. By Wednesday, Daniel's mother had called to check on me. She had been at table 2 during the reception and had heard everything. She said, "I don't know your family's whole history. But I know what I watched happen, and it wasn't right, and I'm glad you said something." She said it without editorializing beyond that. I thanked her and meant it completely. On Thursday, Renata sent me a message. She had been sitting at table 6 for the full duration of Brooke's attempt at a toast. She wrote, I always felt like something was off at your family gatherings, but I never had the language for it. You've always given more than you've received. I don't know if that helps, but I needed you to know that someone in that room saw it, and that what you did was brave, and that you looked absolutely stunning, which is what we should have been talking about all night. I read it standing in the kitchen of our hotel room on the third morning of our honeymoon, and I laughed out loud for the first time in 4 days. The concrete consequence arrived in the form of a phone call from an advertising partnership Brooke had been negotiating for 6 months. A skincare brand with a budget for a long-term ambassador deal. She had mentioned it online twice, the careful strategic kind of mention that influencers use to generate anticipation. The brand's PR coordinator had been at the Rosewood Grand on Saturday. Not as a guest. She had been attending a separate event in the hotel's conference wing and had heard from someone at the reception what had happened, the details traveling the way details do through a building full of people with phones. By the following Friday, Brooke's contact at the brand had gone quiet. By the following Monday, she received a brief and professional email stating that the partnership was being put on hold for an indefinite period while the brand reassessed its ambassador criteria. I know this because Brooke told our cousin Renata about it, and Renata mentioned it to me weeks later with the careful neutrality of someone reporting facts and not taking sides. I did not respond to that information with satisfaction. I received it the way I receive most information now. As data. As the natural consequence of choices being made by the person who made them. I did not attend any family event for the remainder of the year. Not the September birthday dinner my mother organized, not the Thanksgiving gathering my parents hosted in Greensboro. I sent birthday cards to my parents with my real handwriting and reasonable warmth and nothing else. Daniel and I spent Thanksgiving with his family in Richmond. I made a side dish I had never made before, a sweet potato thing with miso that turned out better than it had any right to, and I sat at a table where no one owed anyone anything and the conversation was easy and nobody required management. 2 weeks after the wedding, I received a letter from my parents. Not a text, not an email. A physical letter, handwritten by my mother on the pale blue stationery she has kept in the desk drawer in their study my entire life. It was 3 pages. She described what she believed had happened in the years before the wedding, the pressures she had felt, the ways she had told herself that I was strong enough to absorb what Brooke could not. She said she knew that was not fair. She said she was not sure she had understood, until Saturday, how much of herself I had spent keeping the peace of a family that had never equally distributed its peace. She did not ask for forgiveness in the letter. That was the thing I kept returning to. She did not end it with "please forgive us" or "I hope we can move past this." She ended it with, "I am trying to understand what we actually did, and I think that is going to take more time than I have given it so far." Signed with her full name, Beverly and Caldwell, the way she signs legal documents. I read the letter twice. I put it in the August 2024 folder, now a physical folder that lived in the filing cabinet next to the car titles and the lease. I did not reply immediately. I sat with it for 2 weeks and then wrote back 1 paragraph. I said I had received her letter. I said I was glad she was thinking about it seriously. I said I would be in touch when I was ready. I signed it with my married name for the first time. Mara Caldwell Reyes. Daniel's name added to mine, a new signature, one that belonged entirely to the life I had built on my own terms. The folder stayed in the cabinet. The documentation stayed organized. The August 2024 file stayed on my laptop desktop. Not because I was planning to use it again. Because I had learned what happens when you have no record and how different it feels when you do. The truth had always been there. I had simply spent 4 months building a structure around it so that when the moment came, it could not be argued with or dismissed or explained away. That is the thing about evidence. It doesn't require you to raise your voice. It is January now. 5 months since the Rosewood Grand, since the plum dress and the manila envelope and the 10 words I had written down and crossed out and written again. Daniel and I are in our apartment in Charlotte with the heat running and a pot of something on the stove that he started and I will finish, which is the rhythm we have fallen into naturally and without discussion. Outside the window the city is doing what cities do on a cold Tuesday evening. moving, lit, indifferent in the best possible way. I want to tell you what the 5 months have looked like. Not because the story ends with a single moment. It never does. But because I think the part that comes after the confrontation is the part people talk about least, and it is where most of the real work happens. Brooke and I have not spoken. Not once since she set the microphone down on the table at the Magnolia Ballroom and walked out in the borrowed plum dress. I have not reached out. She has not reached out. There is a silence between us that is not angry, exactly. It is the silence of two people who finally understand the terms of the relationship they have always had and are each, separately, deciding what to do with that understanding. I do not know what she is deciding. I know what I am deciding. I am deciding, slowly and without forcing it, what a relationship with my sister could look like if one ever becomes possible. I am not closing the door. I am also not standing at it waiting. That is the thing nobody tells you about choosing yourself. It does not feel like winning. It feels like grief with better posture. There are mornings when I think about the family Christmases of my childhood, the specific smell of my mother's kitchen, the way my father used to do voices when he read aloud, and the ache of those memories is real and I do not pretend otherwise. What I lost when I stood up at that reception was not only the comfortable fiction that my family was fair. I also lost the version of myself who was willing to trade her dignity to preserve it. That version had been with me for 31 years. Letting her go has not been painless. It has been necessary. My parents and I are in a careful, early place. My mother and I have spoken 4 times on the phone since August. The conversations are short, warmer than they were before, and honest in a way they never were when I was absorbing everything silently. She has not offered to repay the $17,000 that did not reach me. I have not asked her to. What I have done is establish, quietly and without debate, that it will never happen again. Not because I announced a policy. Because I no longer extend the kind of trust that made it possible. That is a different thing from punishment. It is simply the natural result of learning what a person does when they believe no one is keeping track. My father called me on a Sunday in November. He did not have an agenda. He asked about Daniel, about my work, about whether the apartment still had the leak in the bathroom ceiling we had mentioned 6 months ago. We talked for 22 minutes about nothing important, which was, in its own way, the most important conversation we had ever had. He did not apologize with words. He showed up. I am watching to see if he keeps showing up. That is where we are. It is not resolution. It is the beginning of something that might become one, if we are both careful and honest and willing to hold the discomfort of it long enough to find out what is underneath. Something I did not expect, the relief of being known. In the weeks after the wedding, I heard from people I had not expected to hear from. Renata, yes. Daniel's mother, yes. But also a college friend I had not spoken to in 2 years, who had been at table 9 on the wedding day and sent me a message saying she recognized something in what I had done that she was still working up the courage to do in her own family. And an old colleague from my first job who had seen the Instagram activity around Brooke's vanished post and somehow intuited what had happened and wrote to say she had always seen me clearly and was glad I had finally said something out loud. I did not know these people were watching. Most of us do not know who is watching. We operate as though we are invisible and then discover, when we finally act, that the people who cared about us were paying attention the entire time. My work has been the steady thing throughout all of it. Numbers do not have moods. Spreadsheets do not require emotional management. I built my career deliberately, over 7 years of early mornings and careful decisions, and it held. My performance review in October was the strongest I have had. My manager said something in that meeting that I have written in the notebook I keep on my desk at home. She said, "You have always been the person who does the work without making it about being seen doing the work. That is rarer than you know." I thanked her. I thought about 31 years of being the capable one, the quiet one, the one who figured things out without requiring an audience, and I thought about how long it had taken me to understand that those qualities were mine, genuinely mine, and not simply a role my family had assigned me because it was convenient for everyone else. There is a photograph from our wedding that Priya took on her phone before the ceremony. Not the professional photographs, which are beautiful and formal and will go on the wall. This one. It is me, alone, sitting in the bridal suite in my dress before any of the day's events began. I am looking out the window. My hands are in my lap. My coffee cup is on the vanity behind me. I did not know she was taking it. My face in the photograph has an expression I have studied many times since she sent it to me. It is not serene exactly. It is settled. The face of a woman who knows what is in her folder and what is at the door and what she is going to say when the moment arrives, and who has made her peace with all of it. Priya framed it and gave it to me as a late wedding gift. It hangs in our hallway, next to the coat rack. I see it every morning when I leave for work. Every evening when I come home. It is the most honest photograph anyone has ever taken of me. If I have learned one thing from the last 2 years of building that folder and hiring that man and standing up at my own reception with an envelope in my hand, it is this: preparation is not paranoia. Knowing your worth is not arrogance. Documenting what you are owed is not pettiness. These are the basic tools of a person who has decided to stop funding other people's comfort with her own. I spent 31 years believing that being generous without conditions was what love required. What I understand now is that love without conditions is beautiful. Generosity without conditions is a slow drain. They are not the same thing, and the difference matters enormously. I did not ruin my wedding by standing up at that reception. I did not ruin my relationship with my family by telling the truth in a room full of people. What I did was stop pretending. And it turns out that stopping pretending, even when it is painful, even when it costs you something real, is the only way to find out which of your relationships were built on honesty and which ones were built on your silence. Some of them were built on my silence. And those ones needed to either change or end. Most of them are changing, slowly, imperfectly, in the way that real things change. That is enough for now. Daniel is calling me from the kitchen. The pot needs attention. The apartment is warm. Outside it is January and cold and the city is doing its indifferent, lit, moving thing. My name is Mara Caldwell Reyes. I have a husband who knew something was in the envelope before I told him and trusted me anyway. I have a career I built with my own name. I have a hallway photograph of a woman who was ready. And I have, for the first time in 31 years, a life that is entirely, specifically, mine. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.